There's a moment, a pause, a breath. Someone questions your integrity, your choices, your motives, and instantly you feel the urge to explain, to defend, to justify, to be understood. But Machiavelli would warn you, the second you begin to explain, you give them control, not because you're wrong, but because you accepted their frame. And once you're inside their frame, you're playing their game. And in their game, you're already losing. This video is not about ego. It's about strategy. It's not about being cold. It's about staying powerful. Because the person who never explains himself doesn't appear arrogant. He appears certain. And certainty, silent, composed, unmoved, is the sharpest form of dominance. So today, we go deep into the laws Machiavelli would teach you, not to be liked, but to be untouchable. Every accusation feels like an invitation to clean up your image, to protect your name, to show them who you really are. And every time you accept that invitation, you lose ground. You say things like, "That's not what I meant. You misunderstood me. I just want to clear this up." But what you're really saying is, "I accept your role as the judge. I accept that I'm on trial. I accept that I need your approval." And Machiavelli would raise an eyebrow, because the moment you try to prove your innocence, you admit to being under investigation. Here's the truth. Most people won't believe your explanation, not because it's untrue, but because the act of explaining itself looks like guilt. You look nervous. You look reactive. You look like you're reaching. And worst of all, you place your self-worth into someone else's hands. Machiavelli didn't care about being liked. He cared about being above the need to be liked. That's why the powerful don't explain. They let others speak. They let rumors float. They let silence work for them. Because when you don't explain, they have to explain you. They argue in circles. They fill in the gaps. And they often overestimate you. That's the first law of presence. The more you explain, the less you command. The less you explain, the more they wonder. And in power dynamics, mystery always wins. You walk into a room. Someone throws shade. Subtle, calculated. A jab at your past, your attitude, your ambition. All eyes shift to you. Waiting. And that's the trap. Because the second you react, they win. Machiavelli knew this centuries ago. The attack isn't the move. Your reaction is. Most people defend, clarify, and try to reclaim the frame. But in doing so, they confirm the power of the attack. The Machiavellian move is this. You don't flinch. You don't speak. You hold stillness like a sword. Because now the room isn't watching them. They're watching you. And silence, calm, composed, piercing, forces a question. Why didn't he respond? Is he above it? Did the attack just make him stronger? And just like that, the spotlight flips. The accuser becomes the spectacle. Their jab echoes into a vacuum. And that silence? It starts to eat them. They repeat themselves, louder this time, desperate now. Because you won't give them what they need, reaction. And the crowd? They stop judging you. They start judging the one who can't stop talking. The more emotional they get, the calmer you become. And in that contrast, power shifts. Because here's the secret. In social combat, Logic doesn't win. Energy does. And silence, when deliberate, is the most powerful energy in the room. You didn't just avoid looking guilty. You became something rarer, untouchable. Now comes the coldest move of all. Sometimes you don't just ignore the accusation. You invert it. Someone calls you manipulative. You smile, look past them, and say, if that's how you see it. No defense, no apology, just neutral detachment. And what happens? They scramble. They were hoping for a fight. They wanted to watch you squirm. Instead, they're left holding their own weapon, and it starts to backfire. They begin to doubt themselves. Did I go too far? Do I look insecure? Did I just embarrass myself? They came to wound you, but you never stepped into the blade. You let their emotional swing fall into empty air. And now, they're the ones exposed. Here's the brutal truth. Most people survive off reactions. They throw jabs because they need your energy to feel power. When you withhold that energy, when you offer silence or calm detachment, they lose their fuel. And that's when the tables turn. They thought they were the accuser, but now they look like the one begging for attention. And you didn't just look innocent, you looked untouchable. Machiavelli understood this long before psychology ever caught up. Words don't clarify truth, they obscure it. So when they attack you, they're trying to pull you into the fog, to drown you in explanation, to shake your certainty. But you let the silence build. And what happens next is predictable. They overplay. They repeat themselves. They escalate. They look unstable. And you look like the only adult in the room. That's power. And it doesn't come from proving yourself. It comes from needing nothing, not even understanding. When you refuse to explain, you don't just leave a void. You forge weapons, silence, deflection, precision. Each sharper than words of justification could ever be. Silence is the default. Cold, heavy. It forces others to fill in the blanks while you stand unmoved. It makes people project strength onto you because you've given them nothing else to work with. What they imagine is often greater than anything you could have said. And in that imagination lies your advantage, because mystery always outweighs certainty when it comes to influence. Deflection is subtler. Instead of answering, you redirect. Someone challenges your ideas in a meeting. You don't defend. You lean back and say, "Interesting. Let's hear your strategy." Then, in one move, the burden shifts. The accuser is on stage. You've vanished from defense to judge without ever explaining a thing. The crowd feels the shift immediately, and their attention pivots. You are no longer the questioned, but the questioner. And then there are precision cuts. Short, sharp, final. Someone says, "You think you're better than everyone." The ordinary man explains. The Machiavellian answers, "No. I just don't think like everyone." A line like this doesn't open debate. It ends it. It's not a door, it's a wall. And the more walls you build with precision, the fewer people dare to test them. These aren't explanations. They're declarations. They don't say, "I'm innocent." They say, "You can't touch me." They shift the emotional weight back onto the accuser and force them to live inside their own weakness. Because here's the truth. The person who explains begs for innocence. The person who refuses to explain radiates danger. And danger is respected far more than innocence. People don't whisper about the harmless. They whisper about the untouchable. That's why Machiavelli would tell you, never explain. Because once you stop, you don't just end arguments. You end doubt. And what replaces doubt is something far more powerful. An aura. Weapons win battles, but aura wins wars. Machiavelli understood that silence, inversion, and precision weren't just tactics for the moment. They were bricks in a fortress built not of explanations, but of perception. Over time, when you refuse to explain yourself, something strange begins to happen. People stop taking you lightly. They second-guess before they speak. They whisper before they strike, because every unanswered jab leaves a question mark hanging in the air, and those question marks begin to gather like storm clouds. That storm cloud is your aura. It's not about being feared for cruelty. It's about being respected for composure. The man who never explains is seen as untouchable, not because he shouts the loudest, but because he remains unmoved when others try to pull him down. And in a world where everyone scrambles to justify themselves, the one who stays still looks terrifyingly strong. Think of it this way. Explanation makes you predictable. People know exactly where you stand, exactly how you'll react. But silence, detachment, calm defiance, that's unpredictable. And unpredictable people are dangerous. So your aura grows. It walks into rooms before you do. It silences critics before they speak. It makes people measure their words, soften their tone, question their timing. Because deep down, they know. If you didn't explain last time, you won't explain this time either. And that certainty creates hesitation. Machiavelli would tell you, never explain, because every explanation chips away at the myth you're building. And in power games, myth is stronger than truth. When people don't know your limits, they assume you have none. And that assumption, that aura, is what makes others respect you, fear you, and ultimately follow you. There's another dimension of power that most people overlook. It isn't just about what you say or don't say. It's about when. Because in conflict, tempo decides who holds the frame. And the one who rushes to explain has already lost. Most people answer instantly. Someone challenges them, and within seconds they spill out clarifications, excuses, explanations. They think speed proves confidence, but in truth, speed proves obedience. It shows you're dancing to someone else's rhythm. The Machiavellian does the opposite. He slows time. He allows silence to stretch, to weigh on the room, to make every second feel deliberate. A pause, a glance, a measured breath. By the time he responds, if he even chooses to, the urgency has shifted. The accuser looks impatient. The crowd grows curious, and the silence itself becomes a verdict. Because timing isn't passive, it's a weapon. Every delay forces your opponent to sit in their own words, to feel them decay in the air. And when you finally speak, your words land with the weight of inevitability. This is why Machiavelli would tell you, never rush to explain. Control the tempo instead. When you control the tempo, you control perception. And when you control perception, you don't just win the moment, You own the entire field. Machiavelli wasn't naive. He knew that in rare moments, explanation isn't weakness, it's strategy. But here's the key. You never explain sideways, and you never explain downward. You explain only upward, and only when silence could cost you more than words. In a courtroom, for instance, silence can be guilt. Before the law, clarity isn't optional. Or in front of your boss, a board, or authority figures whose judgment controls your future. Sometimes a concise, strategic explanation preserves your standing. But even then, it must be cold, measured, and minimal. Just enough to move forward, never enough to beg. Contrast this with equals, critics, or crowds. Explaining to them dilutes you. It puts you on their level. It signals that their perception defines you. And the Machiavellian refuses to grant that power. Look at powerful leaders, CEOs, public figures. When attacked by the masses, they rarely answer. They let the noise echo. But when speaking to regulators, courts, or shareholders, they may explain, briefly, surgically, because the explanation isn't to save face. It's to secure position. The lesson is simple. Never explain for approval. Explain only for authority. And even then, keep it lean, detached, and strategic. Because explanation as survival is strength. Explanation as validation is weakness. Here's the paradox Machiavelli understood. The less you explain, the more others explain for you. Silence doesn't just protect your image, it recruits allies you never asked for. Because when you remain calm, unmoved, and untouched by accusation, something shifts in the social field. The burden of defense no longer rests on your shoulders. It drifts outward, and others start to carry it. Think about it. The person who argues for themselves looks isolated, alone, on trial. But the person who says nothing, who refuses to be baited, suddenly appears above the fight. And people, friends, colleagues, even strangers, begin to feel an urge to step in. They say, "That was uncalled for. He didn't even respond. Why are you pushing this?" Without asking, you've made them your shield. This is the hidden leverage of not explaining yourself. The crowd fills the silence, but not against you, against your accuser. Because your restraint creates a contrast. You're steady, they're emotional, you're composed, they're desperate. And in that contrast, the crowd decides who deserves respect. Machiavelli would smirk at the irony. You gain the strongest defense by refusing to provide one. Your silence makes others uncomfortable, so they resolve it for you. They rally to your side. They correct the record. They fight battles you never entered. And each time they do, your stature grows. That's why the man who never explains isn't just avoiding weakness. He's cultivating loyalty. He's building an aura that others want to protect. And the beauty of it, you didn't spend a word, a breath, or an ounce of energy. The crowd became your voice. And what's more powerful than defending yourself? Having the world defend you while you remain silent, untouchable, and elevated above the noise. And here's where it all comes full circle. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop living on trial. You're no longer the accused, scrambling for approval. You're the presence others adjust themselves around. Every silence, every pause, every refusal to justify becomes a statement louder than words. I answer to no one. Machiavelli knew this truth. Power doesn't belong to the one who is most understood. It belongs to the one who is least controlled. And when you choose restraint over reaction, composure over clarity, silence over explanation, you transform. Your existence becomes the argument. Your aura becomes the defense. So let me ask you, will you keep explaining, justifying, pleading to be seen? Or will you embrace the stillness, the aura, the untouchable presence that makes people rethink even speaking your name? Comment below. Where do you stand?